Hello and welcome to another fantastic, a show of the Talent Waste Show. We're on a mission, as you know by now, all of our viewers and listeners know, but we're on a mission to find out if talent waste exists through research, through statistics, and brilliant guests each week on the Talent Waste Show. The talent waste affects organisations across all industries where it occurs where an employer can't hang on to that amazing employee, or that employee essentially leaves prematurely from that business. Between 30 and 45% of employees leave organisations within the first year, according to the Office of National Statistics. And a staggering 80% of employee turnover is literally down to bad hiring decisions, as reported in the Harvard Business Review. During Series 1, we spoke to industry leaders about their experiences with talent waste and how they manage to navigate and deliver some of the excellent initiatives throughout what was a tough time through the pandemic and the post-pandemic era. We've had some fantastic guests lined up as well for the second series, and we've already, I think, five or six guests in, and today is no different. You can catch up on the show via Crowdcast, via Spotify on the audio side of things, and of course on the video side with YouTube. You can check us out at Phoenix 51, or of course on our LinkedIn page at phoenix51.io is the website. Of course, Lee McQueen on LinkedIn, across all the socials. Get involved. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to have a guest who has, well, let's be honest, had an absolutely wonderful career in the world of education. Tony is a seasoned principal and chief executive within the further education space, approaching 30 years in the sector. Starting as a director of client services of Waltham Forest College, he has now gone on to drive and guide at the highest level at both Harrow College and Hertford Regional College over the past 7.5 years, respectively. So that is a top 15-year career across Harrow and Hertford Regional as well. If you want to talk, if you want to listen to an education expert, you need to look no further than today. Delighted to have with us Tony Medhurst. Tony, welcome to the Talent Waste Show. How you getting on, buddy?
Thanks very much, Lee. Good to see you again. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tony, look, I mean, based on, I know we've obviously got a longer standing relationship with each other, but, for the audio viewers and the listeners as well, tell us a little bit about you and kind of your career to date.
Well, probably not a typical one that a lot of people would imagine going into the education sector. I moved to this country in 1989. I'm originally from Dublin in Ireland. I was a secondary school teacher there. Things were different back in the 1980s. I'm a little bit older than you, Lee, despite the fact, you can't really tell from the hair colour. But the reality is, came over here to do something different. A few mates of mine were already living over here, did what a lot of people from Ireland did, came over, literally slept on a mattress and a floor in somebody's apartment for a couple of weeks while I sorted myself out with a new job and a new career. Yeah. Went into the private sector, a couple of private training companies, did telephone sales, did a variety of other things related to that.
We've all done that, Tony.
Exactly. And I tell you, it's something that really, really develops a completely different set of skills than you have. You think you can talk, you think you can communicate, but there is no harder job, I think, than actually picking up the phone, cold calling somebody and asking for business. It's a real challenge. And I thought I quite fancy myself as a communicator, and within a few weeks, I thought, I don't know anything by comparison with the people around me who all seem to be brilliant at it. But kind of moved through a second company, got my first management role when the company was going through a bit of a reorganization, a bit of a restructure. Not quite sure whether I was the last person standing or not, but I was asked, would I like to take this on? And I thought, well, I need to pay the bills, so let's see what happens. It wasn't a massive salary increase, but it gave me a lot of experience. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then the college sector, the further education college sector, used to be under local authority control up until the early 90s. And when they came out of local authority control, they had to replace a load of posts that had previously been done by local authorities within the college themselves. So I was lucky enough to get a start at Waltham Forest College. And I said I worked through there, as you quite rightly said, I ended up being a director there. Not quite the rest is history. I did work for a while for a government agency, which again was a very different experience. Made some great friends there, to be honest, which I still have today. But the reality for me was I missed the cut and thrust, and I missed the sort of more immediate impact on students' lives from a direct perspective as opposed to a policy perspective. I was vice principal at a couple of colleges, and then after that I applied for Harrow back in the must be back to 2008 now.
Wasn't
been on The Apprentice, who came and talked to our students and inspired them to do next stuff in their lives. And I thought,
well, to be fair, that's how our paths crossed, wasn't it?
Exactly.
Back then in 2008. I mean, I just won The Apprentice. Thanks for bringing it up. I don't often bring it up.
You don't talk about it, do you?
Yeah, and that's where our paths crossed, actually, and that's where our relationship started. I found it actually fascinating just getting into that, because that spans now 15 years. I mean, that's madness, isn't it? But 15 years of, chief exec principal elements. And most people will just think colleges are colleges, but there's so much more. They're a business as well, aren't they, Tony, to a degree? So employers taking on big... Talk to us a little bit about that, your involvement in Harrow, and obviously what you're doing now at Hertford as well.
Yeah, I think the thing is, people look at the education sector, and the most familiar experience people have with education is probably school. Let's be honest. Not everybody goes to university, not everybody goes to FE. A lot of people, particularly in the past, have come straight out of school, gone to the workplace and whatever. So, when I try to explain what I do to people who might be familiar with the sector, it's just like a head teacher. Well, yes, to a degree it is. But, this college has got a £20 million plus turnover each year. Very few schools have that. Academy chains do. That's fair enough. But we've also got 300 plus directly employed staff, plus a load of agency staff. So by local definitions in local sort of economic ecosystems, we are a large employer in our own right. And the vast majority of the staff are actually, not actually directly involved in the teaching role. We've got 100 plus teachers, but then because of the nature of the FE sector, that we've got an awful lot of people to provide additional support to learners who need it, those with disabilities and the like, but learning difficulties and physical disability. We've got people who have to do all the back office functions. We have to run our own finance, our own HR, the same way as any organisation does. We have marketing, we have sales, because we need to sell apprenticeship places, we need to work with employers. So it's actually quite a complex organisation to lead. And at the same time, we've got students, lots of them. So it's a really interesting mix between the business side of it and then the output side of it, which happens to be people into the workplace or further education.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. I'd like to dive a bit deeper in that, if I can. How do you, as the chief exec and ultimately the principal, how do you devise your time between them, all them different facets? Like, as a business owner and a small business tech startup, Phoenix 51, I have to wear a lot of different hats, but we do it on a much smaller scale. Lots of different hats, but smaller scale. Whereas you're still wearing quite a lot of different hats, but doing it on a larger scale as well. And I sometimes liken it to, a business with almost lots of children in it, because that's kind of what it is, right? I know they're not children, they're teenagers, but ultimately, if any of viewers and listeners have got children, it's like that madness that you've got before trying to get everybody out of the door for breakfast and then doing your day job. Is that kind of how a chief exec principal role type works?
It is. It's an interesting question, because you kind of have to balance between what you need to do and what you like to do and what you must do. And it's not always the same thing. So there's certain things that we have to do because we're a public sector organisation. So therefore, there's a set of accountability that I need to discharge in my role. The other subset of the role, which people don't recognise quite often, is that I'm also designated Chief Accounting Officer. So although I've got an excellent Deputy Principal for Finance and Resources who's got all the accounting qualifications and the like, that is part of my remit. So I've got to keep a very close eye on that. Obviously, the people side of it is absolutely massive. You think about the number of people we have, and then, as I said, we have agency employees and the like. We have 2 sub companies in this organisation as well. It's not just the college. We have a private training company and a resourcing company as well. And there's an awful lot of people stuff that needs to be done. We've got our own people strategy sitting beside our strategic plan, for example. So that takes up a considerable amount of time. And then you've really got to find time to be out there meeting learners, talking to teachers, making sure you are aware of what's going on in the college itself. And that sometimes is the fun bit, to be honest with you. If you go in to find out what the gaming tech students are doing, or you go into performing arts, or you go down to see a football training session, or you work with, the art department on whatever they're doing next, that is brilliant. And that's a really important part of the role. But while you're doing that, the other stuff just stacks up,
almost like the business stuff. Like
exactly. But then the critical thing is to have a really good senior team around you. And that is something that, I've really, really worked on over this second principalship. I had a good team in the last job. I've got a really outstanding team in this job. And it's been really important to get that together where everybody understands their specific roles and responsibilities, understand, what they need to do. And it's the simple things like organization, values and behaviors and the like, which the culture needs to be right. And when I came here first, there was quite I had to do some really significant cultural change and make changes to the organization. Tough stuff. It's not stuff that will win you any popularity contest, trust me. But the reality is the organization needed to make that happen. And that's why it was hard to do the job. Remember also too, I report to a board. I would report to a board of governors. So that is similar to a school structure. These people are all industry experts or government experts or whatever. They bring their own professional expertise to the field. And I have to report to them and I have to account for them, exactly what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And it's an interesting dynamic because, I don't have a line manager present every day of the week. I've got a chair of governors and other governors who I have to report to on a slightly different basis. So that's something that, people from outside probably would find a bit strange, but it works because the dynamic is there and there's a specific line between the governance of the organisation and the management of the organisation. So hiring decisions are mine in the main, for example.
It's fascinating to hear because a lot of people watching and listening from outside of the kind of that education space would just think exactly what you said. Oh, it's just, it's just like a school, or it's just like, but the dynamic is very, very different. You mentioned about people strategy alongside your business strategy. Let's dive into that because you have mentioned about behaviours and competencies, and I'm really glad you did because that's one of the things that we're really passionate about here. And the whole show around talent waste is really looking at how can we keep top talent in our organisations, and actually you probably look at this with two different lenses because you've got the toolkit that the college provide the students when they're going out in the big wide world. Essentially, you've given them a toolkit to be the best that they can be for their working life, essentially. But you've also, like you said, got a people strategy around your own business or your own employees, which is something that you and your leadership team pull together. And so how does that work, Tony? What are the kind of key principles you've learned or some of your experiences of retaining top talent? Or unfortunately, we've all lost top talent as well. What do you think in your experiences are the reasons why we lose top talent or have done in the past?
I think one of the big differences is obviously we are, as a public sector organisation, we have a slightly different relationship with pay terms and conditions to the private sector. We're all governed by employment law, yes, but the reality is that you will have slightly more freedoms than I have in terms of how you can do what you do. So therefore, it's important in our world that we make sure that we maximise every opportunity we have. So we are very, very keen on growing our own in terms of members of staff in the college, and that's across the board. So if you walked around my college, you would find ex-students now working here.
Nice.
Working here in a variety of roles. We've got people at management level, we've got lecturers, we've got technicians, we've got support assistants, we've got administrative workers, because what we try to do is give that sort of wide experience. Yeah. People do, if they thrive in an educational setting, normally understand that that had some positive contribution, added not only educational value, but social value to their lives. And quite often when they see something, they think, oh, I really was, I enjoyed being a student there. Maybe I'll come back. And then maybe I'll see if there's a job opportunity there when you're advertising and whatever. So we try to do that. One of the biggest challenges is, we'll come on to this, I'm sure, but, we've got a lot of skills shortages in this country. And I've got an interesting, set of conundrums about what that actually means from my perspective, because it's not always obvious. But the reality is as well, if you've got, say, a skills shortage area, and we know at the moment, we've got, a construction department that's heaving with students wanting to go into the field, which is brilliant because, again, a few years ago, that was not the case. But finding people to teach in those areas is a huge challenge. Why? Because they can earn, frankly, more money, on sites, on the job, on the tools, and persuade them then to come into a classroom or learning environment to actually probably earn slightly less money, but maybe have a different rewarding experience because you're educating and supporting the next generation, say, of bricklayers, plumbers, and the like, is actually quite an interesting sell, particularly at the moment in the current jobs market, which we know is a challenging one. So we have to put a lot of focus into getting, ironically, to use a phrase that you might have used at one point in your year, raw talent from sites and the like to come in, and we say, look, you want to teach, we will support you through that process. So we'll bring them in, do some sort of initial training with them before we put them on a formal qualification, do some, co-teaching and the like, see how they get on, like nearly a work trial, whatever, and then start to progress them through a career. Because that's what it takes. And also too, in terms of credibility for students, there's nobody better to teach somebody a vocational and technical skill than somebody who understands it from the actual practical side, not a theoretical side. I can read something and talk about it, but I've no credibility to do it, but I can talk about it. Our learners need somebody who can actually just perform with credibility in the various sectors that we operate in and demonstrate and show that experience and motivate them to be the next generation. And that's what's about. But hiring talent, Lee, is a real challenge. There was a time you'd get 20, 30 applications for an individual post. There are posts at the moment we've had to go out 2-3 times to get, and it's all across that. So we've got to think of innovative ways to attract people in within a limited financial envelope, because we want to make a financial surplus every year, but we're not a profit-making organisation. And we get limited government funding, which, frankly, over the past 10 years has not increased hugely. In fact, in real terms, it's decreased by a significant percentage. There's a gap between what we get and what schools and universities get, which means that salaries are less in the FE sector. So we've got to come up with something really quite innovative to bring people in.
Yeah, it's really interesting subject. Again, just to detail that a little bit if we can, because I think our, the listeners and the viewers ultimately will find this quite interesting. When you talk about kind of you have to get innovative and you have to think of different types of ways, is that because of just the pay gap, or is that because actually it's starting to distort the quality of hire? Because ultimately, if you've got 20 applicants, you've got more choice. So typically your talent pool is bigger. So that, not always, by the way, but typically if you've got a bigger talent pool, it means that you've probably got more quality in that talent pool. Would that be fair to say? And actually, as your talent pool shrinks, you've got less choice, and therefore you can only hire what you can hire type thing. So I don't want that to be a loaded question, but is that kind of the innovative side that you're talking about in terms of attracting that talent in? Because if they don't exist or they don't want to come back into education, then you have to create them yourselves, like what you said earlier about growing your own, and you have to try and build. Is that the kind of way to go, you think?
Yeah, I mean, just to use an example before I answer that, in full, there are very good colleges not a million miles from where I am sitting today who have had to shut high-level needs programs because they can't get anybody to deliver. And that is a real issue when you're talking about some of the, the skills gaps that we all know exist. Yeah. So that's issue number one. I think it's really about making sure, as I said, you're clear on salaries and expectations and progression and the like. And, I recognize sometimes, I've got young people at home living in my house who are in their early 20s, and there's very keen aspiration going forward about next step. You've got to be realistic about it. You in 6 months in, you're not suddenly going to become, a director of curriculum or something like that. That's not going to happen.
And so just on that point, sorry to interrupt, but again, just on that point, it's interesting again you've mentioned that, because do you also think that feels to me like an observation of the last kind of 3-4 years that people's expectations have gone through? Do you know what? I'll do this job for 3 months and then I'll be a director, or I'll do this job for 2 months and then I'll be a manager, and that's just not the way it is. So again, sorry to interrupt, but do you think that's an observation as well, that young people's expectations are sometimes too high? There's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but there's also, you've got to be ambitious with patience.
I think we've moved from the concept of job for life. If I get in here at the bottom rung, I'll work my way up, and by the time I'm 105, I might be at whatever level I might be. We've moved from that extreme, which was never a particularly bright idea, let's be clear about it, and you and I would sort of dismiss that in 5 seconds. We've gone possibly to sort of I call it the well, don't use any name of any organisation, but the type of one you can click and get something delivered the same day. So, there is a level of impatience. People don't want to wait for stuff. People, expect it now and want it now. And we're all the same. You go online, you see something and say, oh, I want that. I want it now. I don't want to wait 2 weeks until it's this, that, and the other. That's just the nature of it is. And I think, I don't want to harp on about the pandemic, but, an awful lot of people were conducting their lives like that for nearly up to 2 years. And I think that has had an impact as well. And also, too, remember, this younger generation have lost more growing up time than we did. You and I were a bit more life experienced. We all cope with it differently, but, you could rationalize it and compartmentalize it. But if it takes a couple of more formative years out, I'm not surprised they're a bit more impatient. However, the reality is still what it is. You are not going to be given something on day 2. Somebody's not going to walk into your office and say, you know what, you started yesterday, but I can see real talent from you. Would you like my office? Not going to happen. So I think we as a college have got to make sure that we give realistic work encounters. Yes, they go on industrial placements. Yes, they go for work experience, depending on what program they're on. But the reality is they need to understand from employers' perspective, which is why we can never have enough employers coming into a college, my college, to talk to students about what the real world of work is like and help to manage expectations going forward. Equally, set out the standards and behaviours that they require as an employer in X field or Y field and the like. So that, you can never have too much of that. But going back to our own organisation, we will, as I said, grow people from the bottom up, so to speak, and encourage it. But occasionally, people say, well, I've got no career progression. Well, you've been here for 6 months. You've just passed your probation. I'm not quite sure what your expectations are, but I'm really sorry if we can't deliver that. But, we might be able to in X year's time. But that's the reality of the organisation. You kind of progress if an opportunity becomes available. We don't create something or create a space through. Now, that's not to say we do try to give maybe enhancements or remission for people to undertake specific projects or get into coaching, maybe of new teachers and like mentoring activities and that type of thing, to maybe, if people want to enhance their skill set, to enable them to do that. Equally, some of the things we've picked up recently from the private sector, because we look at that and think, right, what works for them? Right, so we have, set contracts, set hours and all the rest, like everybody does, but they're probably a bit more rigid in our world. But what we've done now since really last summer, we have reduced opening hours during non-term time so that, people get a little bit of time back in the working week. It enables our colleagues in the States to lock up a bit earlier, which is good for them because they're always last off site. Let's be clear about it. They open up, they shut, and it's good for them to have that bit of time as well. And we do a little bit more sort of working from home where possible. In certain areas, maybe in the run up to Christmas, we did a couple of days home working. We can answer the phones remotely these days because technology has given that a huge advantage. So we do try and put some extra things in. But, we don't have the golden ticket. We don't have something like that we can hand over and say, but here it is. Here's your massive wage increase. And it just doesn't work like that. We are limited to what we can do, although we have made in the past couple of years some decent inroads into staff salaries, which I hope people appreciate. Although I also appreciate in the moment it's never enough and can be never enough.
Of course, it will never be enough, will it? It doesn't. Whatever it is, whatever is true, will never be enough. Let's talk about you touched on it again there, the behaviours and competencies piece. Just in your career, you've hired hundreds of people throughout your career. What would be kind of your you don't have to name them, but what would be your standout person that you hired, and give us a little bit of a synopsis on that individual, and maybe kind of the worst hire you ever made as well, for a bit of balance, for a bit of fun, because I'm trying to see if there is a common theme of what makes people's best hires or what makes people's worst hires. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you've got, yes, it's beyond the CV. We know that. It's beyond the qualification. We know that. I think we both be on exactly the same page on that one. No irony. But I think the reality is it's that for me, it's still about fit, and it's about what you need to do at the time. Now, there's an awful lot of rhetoric sometimes around, we'll hire X person because in time they could be Y in a different role or hire. And my answer is that's great, but I need them to do the job they need to do now. What they can be in 5 or 10 years' time is a bonus, but there's a job I need doing and there's a job I need doing now. So please focus on that. That does not mean that you don't hire people with potential. I do get a bit fed up when people want the perfect candidate all the time, that ticks every single box on the criteria, that ticks on that. Give me somebody with a potential and appetite to actually want to do it, to want to show they can do it, to demonstrate that, to bring people with them. And that's the most important thing. Everybody can tell somebody what to do, and sometimes they might do it. If you actually bring people with you and get people to want to do it, that makes the massive difference. And that's the game changer in terms of organizational culture. And that's where your values and behaviors come in, because you're talking about now. So in our place, we've got something called Team HRC. So there's a set of values, there's a set of behaviors that come down through that. It's nice and easy to remember. We've just done a review of it. So therefore, that's all in hand at the moment. So we review it every so often, and that's fine. But I think, I'm thinking about a couple of the people. I've been fortunate to work with some great people over the years. 3 of them have actually gone on to be principals of colleges. And I think, that those 3 people for me, and they know who they are, have been my greatest successes. And you certainly know one of them.
I definitely know one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I still talk to her on a regular basis. We have a chat every so often. It's a safe space for her to talk to me, for me to talk to her, because we're both doing the same job. And that mutual support in a leadership role is really quite important, but it's got to be a safe space to do so. And where she is now, she's up in the Midlands. So, back in her ancestral homeland.
Just to interact with that, I mean, I find it fascinating. When I founded Phoenix 51, the tech business, it can be lonely running your own business, and I've got fantastic people around me. I mean, Heather and Chris, my co-founder with this business, and all my team, they're amazing. But sometimes it is quite lonely, and actually having a forum, if you like, or a safe space to go and talk to other founders, other people that are in the exact same scenario as you, doing the same job and stuff like that as the people that you've pulled through. That is really important, and I think that key thing, that Team HRC that you talked about, this is, I love this, right? This is the set of core values. They don't have to be complicated. They can be really, really simple. That's one of our core values, actually, is being simple. But to be to simplify things and keep things simple, and to really thrive in an environment or in a culture against a set of key values. For me personally, that's the bit that makes the culture. That's the bit that makes the retention. That's the bit that makes people come on the journey with you. Because ultimately, if you hire people based on values that don't fit your company's values, there's only one thing that's going to happen, and they will leave the organization, or you'll try and fire them from the organization. That is absolute guaranteed. It's a little bit like, marrying a partner and you having completely different values. Like, you might say, for example, you might be attracted to each other because actually on paper they look quite good, or facially look quite good, or whatever. But actually, when you get to know somebody, actually I don't really like Tony, and Tony don't really like Lee, so therefore the marriage is never going to happen, or never going to work. It's very, very similar, in my opinion, to it from that. And I just wanted to get your take on that. Do you, maybe not with the marriage thing, but do you agree with that in principle, in the sense of hiring based on the culture and environment is the key to getting them people working in the way that you need them to work?
I think I've said to hiring managers before, hire in haste, repent at leisure. And, if there's a doubt in your mind, I know it's difficult because, you have got a job that needs filling. The person is leaving, or they've already left. You've got a gap in your timetable. Somebody needs to teach that class. Somebody needs to do that task. Somebody needs to file those accounts. Somebody needs to do that. But, hiring the wrong person, even with probation and all the various things we've got, and I'm a great believer in the hiring process ends at the end of probation. It doesn't end on day one when they turn up and have their induction and all the rest of it. It ends as probation, because that's when they turn over to become a complete full employee of the organisation. And I think that's something I remember clearly from learning experiences early in my leadership career. If you don't do that properly, you end up having a real problem down the line. It's that sometimes we can be desperate to get people in. In a world that we both have a bit of a passion for, it's your January signing, isn't it? It's a person that comes in, you desperately need to fill a gap. Somebody's just got injured. You go out, you get somebody, You know, they're available, they're at the right price, they seem to have a bit of experience, they might just fit. I'm sure you can shoehorn them in. Yeah, they're left-footed, but you need a right foot, but you know, it'll all work out. And guess what? It doesn't.
Exactly.
9 times out of 10, that never works. And there's litany of people you can go through the list for your club, my club, and every other club. It's exactly the same in the serious workplace, so to speak. You know, if you put somebody in there and think it might work out, it rarely does. But that is not the same as hiring somebody who has got the skill set, but has got skills gaps that you can help develop and support to fill. That's a different thing. And I think sometimes we operate in an employment environment, and particularly when employers look at young people, you know, our students are mainly 16, 17, and 18. That's our biggest cohort. They are not the finished article. I'm telling you also too, graduates coming out of university aren't the finished article. You know, you're not the finished article ever, frankly. Wherever you are in your career, even the day you retire, you're not the finished article. If you think you are, you've still got something to learn. I'm convinced of that. But we kind of have a set of expectations. We look at that and we say, you know what, they're young, so therefore we'll assume they've got this, that, and the other in terms of attitude, performance, and don't see the positives in it. I think, you know, this is where we step back, and, you know, I know I'm, you know, walking through an open door here, Lee. It's seeing beyond that and saying, right, what have you got that makes you stand out? What makes you a bit special? What makes you work? I'll give you a lovely example. We had a lad doing a public services course with us last year. And in my last student focus group of the year, because I always get students together a few times a year to have a chat with them, just me and them, with a member of my great support work team in there to make sure that, you know, everybody turns up and they do the right thing and they keep a few notes and whatever. But again, it's a very much an open space. And I always say to the students at the start, you know, I'm asking a question, I want the answer. I don't want you to give me the answer you think I want. I want you to give me the real answer. And secondly, no names. Unless you're saying something nice about somebody, I can hear the issues, but please don't identify, because they're not in here to defend themselves or give their side of it, and that's not fair. So students get that really well. You know, it might come as a surprise to people that 16, 17-year-olds understand that. They understand it very, very clearly. They're very acutely aware of how the behaviours and things impact, possibly due to the fact they're on social media a lot. But I was talking to a lad, so he's doing public services. By the way, this is one of the courses that the government wants to get rid of in the next couple of years, because they don't think it adds value, but I would dispute that significantly. What our public services students do in the college, they do an awful lot of work in the community. So therefore, they'll go out and steward events. They'll help with car parking. They'll act as guides. They'll act as interpreters. They'll do all manner of things, because obviously they want to work in a set of environment where communication skills are the paramount. And this lad was saying to me, you know, I said, oh, brilliant news. I said, I've just got a job with Thames Water. And I thought, okay, right. So how did you get that? He said, no, it was something I looked at. I thought, that's really interesting. I'd really like to do that. And I said, so why did you get the job? Because there probably were loads of people who could have applied for that job, probably with more skills, direct skills, or, you know, direct experience of that particular sector. And what he said was, he asked that when he was offered the job. And what the employers, the hiring manager said was, yeah, what you had, the qualification you had was one thing. It said it was all the things you'd volunteered to do, all the experience you itemized from that, said to me, this is a lad who'll roll up his sleeves, get stuck in, he's not frightened of hard work, he'll adapt, he'll do anything, you know, literally will work and adapt to anything we ask him to do. And that's the type of employees we want in our organization, who we can develop up through into whatever role we see fit as we go down the line. So that's how that lad, you know, got a really good starting job, you know.
And you look at that, and it comes back down to what we were saying about earlier about kind of, you know, that the values, that their behaviours, that the attitude of that lad that said, this is what I've done, this is what I can do. And there's a lot of people that don't look at it in that way. Hold that thought. I'm just going to our first and final break of the show. And when we come back, I'm just going to quiz Tony again and let that bad hire. There must be some bad hires. And we're going to have a little bit of fun, and then we'll wrap up the show. We're back after this. Phoenix 51 is a powerful employee technology enabling organisations to make data-driven decisions at every stage of the employee journey, from hiring through benchmarking and development too. The platform provides detailed analytics on the most important asset in your business, your people, enabling organisations not only to make the correct hiring decisions, but also how to benchmark, train and retain them. Phoenix 51, powering your people decisions through every part of the employee journey. And we're back. And that is our sponsor, our channel sponsor, obviously, Phoenix 51. You can go to their website and check out anything that they're doing. So, Tony, coming back to you, we were talking about kind of good hires and, you know, the values and the behaviours piece, and something, as you said, that is an open door with us. I mean, that's something that I've been an advocate of well, for it's one of my core values, actually. It's one of my core beliefs. And ever since we've met, we've talked about that. I mean, it's quite interesting as well when we worked together. We worked together at both colleges that you've been at, but when we first met and worked together at Harrow College, we used to run employability academies with you. And some of the students that would go on them employability academies had the right attitude. They didn't really have the confidence. They didn't really have the self-esteem, to be fair, to go and do things. But they come onto the employability academy, and what they essentially did was it gave them a confidence to grow and to drive into, actually, I can do this and I will do this. And we had people that were not only getting jobs off the back of it, but were becoming student of the year. I remember being at the award ceremonies, like time year after year after year, and most of the people that were coming on the employability academy were now all of a sudden up on stage. They're reading out poetry. They're doing things. They wouldn't have done that before. Yeah. So how much of it is it in young people and in all people, actually, confidence, you know, that ability to be able to say, do you know what, I'll give it a go, rather than, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to bother?
I think you really do make an entirely valid point, which you're not going to expect me to disagree, because it's fundamentally the principle behind why I do what I do. You know, one point before I get into the meat of it, you know, we all talk about, and I hear ministers and, you know, large employers all talk about the brightest and the best. We want the brightest and the best. If you limit yourself to the so-called brightest and best, you're actually writing off a significant part of the population. And if we're to grow as a country in terms of economic productivity, we've got to make sure that everybody's got a decent life chance to contribute back. That's the reality of it. And I feel particularly passionate about that, because we have a lot of students gone through life experience both in school and adulthood, maybe hasn't gone quite as well as they hoped it to be. And they come to us and they look for something, and they look for something that gives them, you know, confidence, as you say, resilience and the like, to actually make a really good attempt at getting a good and meaningful career. And let's be clear, you know, if you're a good bricklayer these days, you can earn £1,000 a week doing that. You know, that's not to be sniffed at. That's a lot of money. But the reality is, we've got a model in place in the college league called what we call the destination curriculum. And the fundamental principle behind it is, you know, yes, you come to college to get a piece of paper that says you can do what you can do. I've got a level this, or a level that, or an MVQ in this and MVQ in that, or I'm competent in this. But it's where you're going with that piece of paper that makes the difference. And if you don't know where you're going next, you know, this whole experience doesn't work as well as it could. You don't just turn up at the airport on a given Thursday in August with your wife and your kids, Lee, do you? And think, right, there's a destination board. I wonder where I'll go. No, you plan, you get it all organised, you book, you make sure you know, that's what you would never dream of doing that. So why would you enter education not knowing what you wanted to do after that? And it's amazing. We get a lot of people coming to the college, I said adults and youngsters, who genuinely don't know what to do next. Now, things like apprenticeships and the like are different, because apprenticeships are brilliant. And again, we can never have too many employers wanting to take on apprentices. You know, there are some really great young people and young adults out there who are really want the opportunities as an apprentice, because it's a job with training, not the other way around. They want to work and earn and learn at the same time. And that's a really good attribute for the right people in the right organisation. But going back to this sort of destination curriculum model, we do a load of wraparound stuff on that. So it is about literacy, numeracy, English, maths, whatever, IT, opportunities to volunteer in the local community. We've got our health and social care students out every week at the moment, serving meals for Age Concern in a local branch of Age Concern. We work with the University of the Third Age. We've got students going out and picking up litter in a sort of a nature park nearby where we work. We've got, people going out and coaching in the community. We've got loads of stuff going on, because it's about getting that societal awareness for young people, particularly they've lost the opportunity to do during COVID as well. That you've got to give that wider skill set, what I was coming back to before. But it's also too, and this is, again, your field better than mine. It's about entrepreneurship and the like, but it's also about that mindset. It's about being able to, call it problem solving, call it whatever you like. not to be discouraged when something doesn't go quite right. You know, no entrepreneur, you can attest this, Lee, goes in, gets it right first time, sets up the business, and is a millionaire within X weeks. Doesn't work like that. There are very few that have, and good luck to them. Vast majority doesn't work like that. There's more failures in startups than there are in successes, as we all know.
Businesses, top 3%, 97% of small businesses fail. Right. So
it's often due to cash flow more than anything else. So you've got to be aware of that. But what we want is we want people to bring that mindset to whatever they're doing. And there's two things I want to happen more from my college, and I keep on putting the challenge out there, is we need to instill competition into it. We've got people going for bricklaying competitions, chefs competitions, and all the rest of it to compete against the best from other colleges, to give them that boost if they do well. We got a couple of real big successes last year in those two areas, in brickwork particularly, and in master pastry making and the like. You know, and they suddenly see, wow, I'm really good. I've looked at all these other people, and I'm good. I can do this.
Validation, isn't it, Tony? It's a validation almost.
Everybody wants validation.
Gives you that confidence piece. There is a validation of, okay, I've got I'm verified. I've got a validation. I know that I've, somebody's pat me on the back, or I know that I can do something, or I've won something, or I've come second or third, or again, come back to that sport feeling, which I'm sure we'll talk about before we finish. But it is that ability to be able to see how you're progressing. Yeah. Most people want to see how they are progressing. It doesn't have to be at the peak of the mountain. And a good colleague, a mentor of mine, really, his name is also Lee. He once said to me, if you're at the peak of your mountain when you're 25, 26, 27, that is a long way for you to be going down the other end of that mountain. You've got another 10, 20, 30 years of working or whatever it might be. If you peaked, you've peaked, right? So there's only one way down from that point. So surely you need to balance out that plan that you was talking about, that destination, really go up towards that peak, but enjoy the journey, right? Have the patience to be able to go there, not rocket there in 2, 3, 4 months, and then spend the rest of your career essentially going downwards, right? Because that's the whole analogy, isn't it? If you've hit the peak, there's only one way down.
Exactly. I think also too that one of the key aspects of this is when I talk to students at all levels, and when we have got students with learning difficulties, we've got people doing higher education. We offer 3 full degree programs now, Lee. And it's really brilliant to have that level 6 experience in there. They do the full degree. We work with University of Hertfordshire, our partner, and we offered it in a couple of areas like games tech and visual merchandising and performing arts, and that's really good. And they're all excellent programs. But the key for me is when I talk to students and they're, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure about that. You say, right, what can you do this week that you couldn't do last week? Oh, I learned this week to do that, because it's practical learning in the case of a college like this. And I said, well, that's brilliant. You couldn't do that last week. You can now do it. What are you learning next week? Or next week, we're going to do such and such. That's great. It's all about incremental learning, bite-sized learning, putting one bit on top of another on top of another. And that's how we progress and develop skills. And those are the technical skills. The other side of it is, and this is what really concerns me when we talk about skills shortages and debates and whatever. Yeah. Employers quite rightly say it's a difficult hiring market at the moment. It has been for some time. And I would agree with that from our own experience. The reality is, quite a lot of the time, when you talk and have the in-depth conversation with employers, the technical skills is not the issue. It's the wider, more holistic skills that are needed.
100%. Most of the time. And that's it as well. Most of the time.
Lee, we've got an education system that's set up to do the complete opposite.
Yeah.
We assess via examination. We're obsessed with examination. So A-levels, exams. The new technical qualifications, exams. Apprenticeships now at the end of it, an exam, right? Great. For those of us who were quite good at exams, happy days. For those people who are not so good at exams, bit of an issue. Yeah. Exactly. The interesting thing is higher education is moving away from exam-based. They do an awful lot more collaborative working, team tasks, team presentations, and all the like. Why? Because they know that's what is needed in the workplace. Yet the system that feeds that is obsessed with exams. My plea is that people listen to that need for the wider development of skills. For everybody, find their talent and let's see what we can do with it. We are obsessed with narrowing opportunity in terms of the curriculum. We need actually to do the complete opposite, in my view. We need to broaden those opportunities. Yeah. and make sure that we give the opportunity to everybody, no matter what their pace of learning, because some people, will get through to whatever level X in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, 15 years, right? It doesn't matter, but they'll get there. And also, too, it's the way they get there, because the learning style of exam-based, or indeed big long theses and dissertations and the like, might not be for them. But that does not mean they can't operate at that level successfully and therefore enhance a company and make an employer feel good about the staff they've got.
Literally completely agree. I mean, I think that I am one of them other people, although I'm much older now, so probably don't count anymore. But I am one of them people, and the business that I built, the Raw Talent business, and obviously Phoenix 51 business, has been built on them principles. Our principle is not about saying that an education doesn't matter, or that the academic piece isn't important. It is important, but it's having the balance of that other side. That we talk so heavily nowadays, and rightly so, about inclusivity and being inclusive as employers. And most of the time we talk about maybe gender, or maybe race, or maybe ethnic minorities, or whatever, in that kind of D&I space. We're not really talking about the education diversity. Diversity of mind for somebody who is more streetwise maybe than somebody who's more academic. That is a diverse mindset that actually in your business could work extremely well, because what you're getting the best of both worlds in that way. So when people talk about D&I and diversity inclusion, male, female, BAME, for me, it goes deeper than that as well. And it is that education diversity. Okay, I learned this way, you learned that way. Let's bring that together in them group exercises, in that workplace. That drives a better team. You mentioned earlier, I suppose, finally from me, I'm just conscious of time, but you mentioned right at the beginning about the people strategy in your leadership team, the people that you've pulled together, and you have got a great team. Can I just ask, they are they a diverse of mind team? I'm not worried what they look like. I'm worried about their mind. Do they come to the table? And the reason why they're so good is they come around the table and they challenge, and they share different ways of thinking. Because that, for me, is the most important part. If we can get a diverse way of thinking, a diverse working landscape, that's the bit that's going to propel our business or our fortune.
Well, the answer is both, actually. It's a diverse group in characteristics, and it's also diversity of thought as well. So I'm fortunate, as I said, to have a really strong team that I've been able to recruit and put into the organisation. Some people I've worked with, one particular member of staff I worked with back in the 90s, and when I walked in, I went, "Oh, you're here. Great. That's good." Because this particular individual is very reflective, and she's the one who always asks the difficult question. She'll say, "I've just got a question," and she'll say it, and you go, "Yeah, you're right." We've got other people from different backgrounds. We've got people who, have experience in, very much more a civil service background. We've got people who've been imbued through education, people who came into education late. We have a lot of people who actually studied and completed their own high-level qualifications quite late in life. So we've got a really interesting mix of people. And what we have to do is, and what we've actually really put in sort of the diary, so to speak, for our senior meetings is now a regular slot to actually have a strategic conversation about a key issue for the college, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the operational decision making that we have to make as a senior team, sign things off, approve this, approve that, and do whatever. We felt that we weren't doing ourselves justice. We weren't allowing ourselves and giving ourselves the permission to actually spend time doing what we were actually here to do, which is give consideration to key issues. So, aspects, going back to the people strategy again, that's something that comes up quite regularly because, we are a people-focused business and we are a people business. So therefore, there's aspects of that we discuss at our meetings and give a really good space to do that. And guess what? If we don't finish it next week, we carry it forward to the following week because, just because the time elapses doesn't mean the conversation elapses, because that would be completely wrong. I think you can only do that with a mature and experienced team. Doing that from the start is quite a risky thing to do, although I'd encourage anybody to try it. And allow people to talk. But people have got to feel safe disagreeing and saying, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I actually don't agree with that, because I
Yeah, it
think
doesn't have to be one of these. It doesn't have to be like a big argument or anything like that. But
no, no,
and
no,
that's
that's not
hard.
respectful.
No, for sure. I was going to say that is difficult. That is that safe space again. That is difficult to drive that space or that culture internally to make sure that it is safe enough for people to be able to challenge, for people to be able to ask them types of questions without feeling, actually, I think this, but I'm not going to say it. But just in case, you need them people to be able to. But what you don't want somebody just asking, the awkward questions for the sake of asking the awkward questions, or being a thorn in the side all of the time. But you do need to have that conversation to make sure that you're making the right decisions, because that's the thing. I mean, this was on another podcast that I've run, the Spurs podcast. Like my co-host on with Ricky last one on Spurs, and we had a guy on who's a football finance expert, and it was sticking with me forever. What he said, he basically turned around and said, is that the majority of things that go wrong are based on decision making. So basically, if you think about it, if you're making decisions, regardless of where you are, if it's football and business, education, whatever, whatever decision you make, there's going to be an outcome to that decision. We just got to make sure that we're making the right decisions more than we're making the wrong decisions, and that's the kind of the motto, really. Tony, absolutely phenomenal. Where can people look you up? Where can people find you? How can people get involved in the local aspects of the college, that sort of stuff? You mentioned that you're hiring as well. Where can people kind of look you up, buddy?
Yeah, I mean, I have a very, what I politely describe as a benign presence on LinkedIn, Lee. I'm not a social media person. I'm not on any other channels, I have to say, but the college obviously is. So you can look up Hertford Regional College on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and the like. We are hiring stuff up there, so people who are interested in working for the college, that's absolutely brilliant. We also have a subco called Hearts Resourcing Group, and we always are prepared to take on associates through that, to train them through. So Hearts Resourcing Group, you can look up that as well if you're interested in getting into the education sector. But the big thing I would also say as well, we have an info@hrc.ac.uk email address, which is basically to write into the college. If you're an employer, or you're interested in looking at apprenticeships, if you're interested in, sharing your experiences with students, you're in various fields that we offer, and you think, apart from agriculture, we do everything in terms of the vocational and technical space, and we always want to work with more people in the employment sector. That's the lifeblood of what we do. We want to get the best people we can out into your business, but from a different perspective to your world, Lee. It's ours are coming out probably not perfectly formed. We want you to help shape their career to the benefit of your organisation,
and rightly so. That's how you drive retention in them businesses.
Correct.
And that's what organisations need to look at. Again, taking a segment of what you said earlier. Sometimes, and we're all guilty of doing this. We need somebody now. We've got a seat now. We're going to make a hasty decision. Go and look at the young people. Go and look at the apprenticeship route. Go and look at the graduate route, because there is some phenomenal talent out there ready to come into your business, be like a sponge, learn, take on. And the thing is, attitude, behavior, and competency trumps skills all day long. That you can have all the talent in the world, and we'll go back to football. You can have all the talent in the world as a footballer, but if you ain't got the right attitude, if you just want to sit on the sofa and do nothing, you're never, ever going to realize that. And that is the key thing. So I think that we need to, I'd probably go as far as to say that SMBs or small, medium-sized organizations, enterprises, even the bigger organizations that are around, we have a responsibility to our young people to give them an opportunity, to give them that opportunity to grow and to support them in what that career looks like. And young people out there as well, you've also got a responsibility to do that over time. Don't climb your mountain and get to the top of it in 2 years, because it's a long, long time to be going down the back of that mountain. So think about that path of what that looks like. Tony, my final question to you is probably going to polarize opinion on this for sure. But Tony and I have known each other for a long time. I am a Spurs season ticket holder. Tony is a massive Arsenal fan as well. And at the moment, you guys are top of the league. So my final question to you is, and I hope this doesn't happen, by the way, that you win the league, of course. But do you think you're going to win the league?
Ask me at the end of May. I think for most of us who've been around a bit, and I've been, an Arsenal fan since before you were born, Lee, and a season ticket holder for more years than I care to mention, there is certainly a connection between, I think, the fan base and this team that hasn't been around for a while, which is really positive, no matter where we end up. Secondly, if somebody had said, you're guaranteed to finish top 4, which we probably nearly are at this point in time, I think most Arsenal fans would have said that's a fantastic experience. I think my fear is that, it's a bit, if the time feels right, if there is a genuine opportunity for the team to win it this year. There's a variety of other things going on. A couple of other teams are underperforming. We know who they are. They will only get stronger again because the infrastructure and financial clout that some of them have, above and beyond your club and my club. So it feels like we've got to do it. I still get concerned that, it might be coming up to the end of February, but in real football terms, we're about 6 weeks out of kilter with where we normally would be. And nobody would be saying, 2 points ahead and a game in hand in the 3rd week of January, oh, you're odds-on favourite to win the league, particularly when you're up against, a giant in modern footballing terms who've won the title 4 times out of the last 5 with one of the best managers the world's ever seen. Let's be clear about it. So we have got a real challenge, but I think the encouragement I get is seeing some of the interviews after games from some of the players when emotions are running high, when the media training kicks in, and we all know there's media training for everybody these days, but you see a genuine sense of passion and wanting it and believing it, which seems to have been instilled in them. And for that reason alone, I really, really hope they do it. And it will be, I think, a great reward for a club to show the fact that they've stuck with a manager who a lot of people probably wanted to get rid of and thought wasn't up to the job and had no experience and know this and know that. They've given him a chance, going back to employment. They haven't said we need to change every 5 seconds because we've lost 3 games. They could have easily made a decision to go for somebody else. They haven't. They've stuck with him. They've supported him through difficult decisions, your point from earlier on. And let's hope that might, if Arsenal do win it, and I hope they do, but I'm not 100% convinced, I'm afraid to say, if they do win it, that could maybe change some of the mentality in football, because I do look at some of the hiring and firing decisions that are made and you think to yourself, really?
It is a law in its own right, isn't it, in that football thing? I mean, I agree with you on everything that we've talked about today, apart from that last one. I totally disagree that I hope Arsenal win the title. But look, on that sports bombshell, I will leave it there. Tony, you've been absolutely fantastic. We'll put the show out on the socials, and there you have it. Another fantastic show. The Talent Way show comes to an end. Look out on the socials for the episodes when they're going live, and we'll be back next time around for the next showing of the Talent Way show.